All right. Well, welcome everybody. We're going to start out with our forum this evening. Rick has got a presentation for us. Are you ready, Rick?
I'm ready.
Righty. Well, take it away in that case.
I'm just really glad to see that guy that always gets confused with me. N1MM is next to me. That's so this is a bit of a saga, and my biggest challenge of this presentation was collapsing about 3 years of work into 30 minutes of presentation. So I'm going to cruise through it a lot. There are sections of this that I could do an hour on by themselves. So this will be the Reader's Digest version. I'm called it from FM 19HW to FM 19IA, which is basically relocating my my ham radio station from my townhouse right next to Reston Town Center to some property that I got in Great Falls. My brief history: I was first licensed as a novice in 1968. I through a couple of novice licenses, eventually got out of college into the Navy, and right before deployment, I got my advanced class license. It was WD4LBY and operated from the USS Saratoga, running hundreds, maybe thousands of foam patches while we were deployed in the 70s. I got my extra class in 1979. I was originally KO4F and then AI1V, which are both kind of really joke calls, I guess. I got serious about ham radio. I was in and out of the hobby quite a bit during that period of time. And in the early 2000s, I got my first K3 and got into contesting and, started paying attention to my DXCC counts and things like that. And all this was from my townhouse, literally using 100 watts in a wire. With, a completely unapproved, illegal wire antenna that I managed to get away with for about 10 years. I did get a Manatee call as N1RM, my initials, in 2014. I found a piece of land for the shack in August of 2017. I made the first QSO from there in 2019 using just a dipole, and we got the tower and beam in place in July of 2020. So I've had several stations over the years. My first novice station, DX60 and SB301 with a 40-meter V basically laying on the roof of my parents' house. Didn't do a lot with that. I got a SB401 later on after I wasn't a novice anymore. Eventually replaced it with a 10-Tech Omni A, which is the station you see up here in 1982 in Connecticut. Of course, I used the Collins S line on the Saratoga. We had a Henry 4K for the Mars bands, 35-foot whip that was 90 feet off the water and worked amazingly well as long as the ship didn't turn to the wrong direction. My first townhouse station was, I didn't have enough room for anything I thought, so I got an FT857D, which is everything in a box that it sort of does okay, but not a great radio, but an okay radio, but it didn't seem to have the ears that I wanted. Used an SCGC auto tuner and EdFed wire, and my first real townhouse station, I'll call it, is when I got the K3 on the air. With an OCF dipole that I'd kind of optimized for my environment there. Along the way, I had the incredible privilege of guest opping at a couple of amazing stations. I only put these in here because they were a little bit of inspiration for me. K4VV, this is one of his towers up here, one of his four towers, I guess. And you can see he had a lot of aluminum in the air. This is the shack here. It had three. I guess we actually had a fourth station going in this contest. And then I still guest op down at the goat farm at NR4M. You can see all of his towers here. When I first drove up and saw this, I looked at this tower here and I said, yeah, he put that 40-meter beam, but he only put it halfway up his antenna. So I kind of went in and I said, why'd you only put your 40-meter beam halfway up the antenna? He says, well, it's a 200-foot tower. That's the right height for a 40-meter beam. Anyway, this is examples of what's possible with dollar signs there. But I did learn a lot about different equipment and about what breaks and what doesn't from being involved in these stations. Here's my original goals. I won't go through them all. I basically wanted to get ultimately a legal limit on everything 160 through 10. Eventually I'll do VHF and UHF. It's not right there right now, but I definitely wanted at least 2 elements on 40 meters. Um, I wanted to be able to remote things at some point, and I wanted a freestanding tower, and for 40 meters, 70 feet seemed like a good height for that. So a lot of, in the shack itself, since I am largely a contester at this point, or that's the vast majority of my QSOs, I wanted to have an environment that could allow me to keep my butt in the chair for a long time. So the first thing was I needed to find a home for this, and we looked for about 10 years. And then this thing kind of just popped up on the radar from a realtor, and I was looking for an acre and a half minimum, and this had 3 acres, and it's only 5 miles from our house in Reston, so that was great. I mean, I could have gone an hour drive away and probably gotten something a lot easier, but I didn't figure I'd use it that much. This is a 15-minute door-to-door drive, so it had a small, well-built two-car garage with a one-bedroom apartment above it, and that's the only building on the property. So I mean, it's basically a ham shack. What more could you want? And it's purportedly or reportedly had no HOA. Of course, I did a little research, and the night before closing, I found out it actually does have an HOA. But and it was 1975, and guess what? HOAs, once they exist, I'm not sure if God can dissolve an HOA, but you can't get rid of them. They exist forever. But I decided to go ahead. The covenants didn't have any specific prohibition against towers. But the architecture committee had to approve any new structure, and of course a tower fell into that category. So I just said, well, what the heck, I'll go forward, and if they don't let me put up a tower, I'll use wires and maybe sell it I got a good deal on the land, so I got it. I was able to go ahead with the closing. And then on October 30th of 2017, the day before Halloween, by a vote of 2-1, they said, okay, put up your tower. So the only thing better than not having an HOA is having an HOA that says, sure, put up your tower. So this was awesome. This was great. I thought I was home free. So I had the start of a plan. This is the plot map. Here's the shack right here in the driveway, Utterback Store Road here. And I just decided to put the tower right here to keep it clear of things. I could have put it right here, but it would have been, I would say, an eyesore. I think the fact that I agreed to put it back here or proposed putting it back here really helped me with the HOA committee, because this almost looks like a park here, and this is the entrance to the development. So I didn't want them to have that the first thing to see. There's also a lot of trees, as you'll see in the pictures later on, kind of protecting this around there. And even though Fairfax County only requires a 25% setback, I decided to do 100% setback just to be conservative. So the tower height is 70 feet. I set it back 70 feet from the boundaries. So I had a lot of choices to make at this point. First thing was equipment. That was probably the easiest. I already had a K3S and a P3. I also know a guy, that's a kind of an inside joke, ACOM 2000. I actually do, I'm one of 2 places that does warranty repair for ACOM in the United States. So I know those amps pretty well, and I actually already had an A2000 that I had loaned to another shack. I also got a KPA 500 for 6 meters, since the A2000 doesn't handle 6 meters, and also that kind of instant-on backup. So that's it's kind of a nice thing to have on the desk there. I went with an Orion 2800 rotor. This has since been upgraded since I bought it. I haven't upgraded it, but Orion has a new model of this. It's a strong rotor. There's no brakes. It's a worm gear drive. There's no position pot. And those are the 2 things that, talking to people, these are the things that break in rotors, is the brake or the position pot. So I said, well, this doesn't have either. That's good. I actually used the Green Heron controller instead of the Orion controller because I was used to it. I liked it. It's smaller, and it seems to be, at least it's better for me. So the next one was the tower, decide on the tower. And I ended up with Tri-X DX70. So those of you that have been around a while know that Tri-X is no longer in business. So there's a story behind this, of course. This, by the way, this could be a postcard, isn't that gorgeous? Anytime, this is what you should hand your HOA when you go in for approval. Say, look how gorgeous these towers could be. So as I said, I wanted it 70 feet. I wanted maintainable by an 80-year-old because in 12 years, I'm going to be 80 years old. and I want to enjoy this for at least that long. To me, that meant I wanted it self-supporting with no guy wires, telescoping with a motorized winch, no hand cranks, and I wanted it tilt over for ground level maintenance. And this shows you what the tilt over arrangement is for the Tashian, actually. So I decided at that point, mainly because US Tower had just gotten rid of their ham prices, and so everybody was paying commercial. I decided to go with the Tashian. It was cheaper. And I also like their tilt over fixture a lot better. No climbing. I never learned it, and I'm too old to learn at this point. Never want to do it. And then I had another, I'll call it a semi-miracle. My employer was about to scrap a Tri-X DX70. I think this is about a 40-year-old tower. It looks like it's about a 100-year-old tower in this picture. And getting into it, it might have been 100 years old. But anyway, it was available to me. They were abandoning this building and they were going to scrap the tower. And I did it all above board. I said, talk to the lawyers, and if I can have the tower, I'll take it off your hands for free. And lo and behold, it really is a Tri-X DX70. So those of you that don't know the history, Carl Tashian was engineer for Tri-X. And so all of the Tashian designs are pretty much the same drawings as all the old Tri-X designs. So it's the same tower. This is basically identical to in most respects, to a Tashian DX70. So, and it's free. So all I have to do is haul it away. Well, everything is harder than you first expect. But this is moving day for the tower. I had to hire a crane because of its proximity to the building. I couldn't back a truck in and just lay it over on it. Fortunately, a good buddy of mine had a high capacity trailer that I think was rated at 7,800 pounds. The tower weighs a ton. It's right about 2,000 pounds. And we were able to get it in his trailer and managed to get it from Newington. This is down Newington where the tank farm is, down there near Fort Belvoir, all the way to Great Falls. And guess what? It fit in my garage. And we had no crane at this end. So this was basically us three and one of those engine winches that you can get at Harbor Freight. Those floor standing hydraulic engine winches. You can get one that'll lift 2 tons. And so we could actually using that, and you can see we used some round fence posts to roll it off the trailer into the garage and onto some pilings. And then there was a lot of work, and you're talking to a guy that I never even took shop class in high school. So, to me, anything steel was get on the phone and call somebody that knows what they're doing, because I sure as hell don't. But I had a ton of steel now to deal with. Actually, I had almost a ton of steel, and the rest of it was rust. You can see there were some really tired parts of this tower. Fortunately, the structure itself, the structural steel, was in great shape, but it needed a lot of finishing. There were some really weird modifications made to this tower by the previous owner, one of which was a way to lock it up, lock it in place once it was extended. And because of that mechanism, there was something riding along this outer tube all the time, and it eventually wore away, the galvanizing. So I had to get an angle grinder, big cup brush, a couple of dozen cans of Rust-Oleum cold galvanizing. And if you look at this real carefully, this is actually an SAIC property sticker on it. So hopefully I didn't break any rules of SAIC. By the way, my employer was not SAIC. I did not get this from them. I got this from somebody that must have gotten it from SAIC. But I actually preserved that when I refinished it. I thought that would have been a nice little memorial to SAIC. But you can see a lot of rust. Even the cables had a lot of rust on it. This was the tensioning spring. This is the drive for the winch. It was a mess. But I got a care package from Tashian because it is almost identical to a Tashian DX70. I was able to get a whole bunch of parts. I replaced all the cables, all the pulleys. I got an upgraded motor controller, complete with the remote control box, so I can raise and lower the tower from inside the shack, and a few other miscellaneous fittings for the tower. And I also got the rebar cage custom made that the tower bolts to. You can see there's plates here. There's 18 bolts that hold this tower to the footing. And this was, he said they haven't changed any of their dimensions since they designed the tower back at Tri-X. So I was able to get the rebar cage. And this this is about a year later, part-time working on it in my garage. Oh, the other thing I learned, by the way, was how not to die while you're painting with Rust-Oleum cold galvanizing. These masks really work. You can get them at Home Depot, and it's amazing how effective they are. And I will never paint indoors without one of these masks again. They're just amazing. So anyway, you can see all new cables, new winch. It's in the garage. This is actually right before, in fact, the forklift's already hooked up to it, getting ready to tow it out. So that's the tower. Then the building permit from hell. Okay, that's the story. I could do a whole hour presentation on this, and I won't go into all of it, but just notice these two dates. My initial application for the building permit was May 2018, and it was issued in November of 2019. Okay, so I got to know the guys down there. I mean, they eventually felt sorry for me. I think they helped me along, but I had no idea what I was doing. The problem was, as a freestanding tower, it needed a footing that was more than 6 feet deep. And once you go with a concrete piling more than 6 feet deep in Fairfax County, in almost every case, you are now called a critical structure, and you get thrown right into the commercial plan review process. And I had no idea what I was doing. It took me a long time and quite a few dollars to figure it out, including I had to do a geotechnical survey of the tower site with core samples going down 25 feet. So I had to hire this drill rig and these guys to take soil samples all the way down to 25 feet. But I eventually finished. Along the way, I generated a lot of paper, or paid for a lot of paper. I had a geotechnical survey. This is the testing from the concrete slump tests and the fracture tests on the concrete, the structural analysis from Tashin, and detailed plans, all of which had to be approved by a Virginia licensed professional engineer. But here I am posing next to the building permit. It's time to dig the hole. Of course, it's winter now. Winter some year. I forget what year it was. I guess it was like winter 2019, 2020. 9 feet is really deep. I couldn't believe it. He buried his arm almost all the way to the bottom of the ground in there. The way the Tashin towers work is you suspend the rebar cage on these stringers from a form. The only forms you have from the concrete is the 6 inches that sticks above ground. All of the rest of the concrete has to be against undisturbed earth by design. So what you do is you level the heck out of this thing, because there's no adjustment for leveling on the tower once the concrete's set. So you basically, I use my 8-pound precision tower leveling tool, known as a sledgehammer, and was able to get everything perfectly level. And then you can see it was really muddy. We didn't risk getting the truck back here, so I had this little shuttle to go back and forth to dump the concrete in the hole. So 9 yards of concrete later, it's in there. I managed to wrestle this thing off my pickup truck. This is the tilt-over fixture, and get it in place, but I obviously needed help for the 2,000-pound tower. And this is one of my favorite pictures of the project. It looks like a scene from a Transformers movie, doesn't it? I mean, it's just awesome. This tower, coming through the bushes on the top of this great big all-terrain forklift. So there it is, getting attached to the tilt-over structure. At that point, you can see the concrete's all set. So next is the antenna. I decided on a StepIR DB18E. It's really funny. I was fixing an amp for a good friend of mine who's a contester, and he asked me what antenna I was trying to get, and I said I was looking at a StepIR because I really like the band edge to band edge coverage and optimization that it does. He said he's watched me fix his amp, and he said, StepIR is the perfect antenna for you because when it breaks, you can fix it. It's every StepIR owner I know is a love-hate relationship with them, because the saying is they work great until they don't. But so far, knock on wood, mine has behaved very well. This is the analysis I did. Once I decided on a StepIR, there were many different configurations, including the monster 36-foot boom. I have an 18-foot boom, and I was relatively conservative with wind loading and the structure of the tower and everything. So you can see the blue bar is how it behaves in gain and front to back versus the other ones across the different bands. And DB18E did well for me, so I just decided on that. It's not everybody's antenna, but in retrospect, I think I made the right decision. Of course, now that the garage is empty from the tower, it becomes the antenna assembly zone. And the steppers, by the way, you just need to set aside a couple of weeks to build a stepper because you don't want to do it in a hurry. And you got to spend a lot of time figuring out what they really mean. Their instruction manuals read a little bit more like a novel than a Heathkit manual. So sometimes you need to read 5 or 6 pages ahead before you really understand what you're looking at on the current page. I also have a tilt plate here. The tilt plate allows the antenna to stay mostly level as the tower tilts over, so you can work out it at ground level. That added another set of complexity to it in terms of getting everything square and level, but I figured out a way to do that. And here's the boom with the EHUs, the motorized tape reels, and then the other supports for the boom. This has 3 what they call trombone elements. It's basically the 3 looped elements that you saw in the original picture. But you got to be prepared for stepper stuff. And the first thing I encountered was these fiberglass tubes that form these U-shaped elements. They telescope. They come all collapsed down, and you pull them apart and you kind of jerk them to sort of lock them in place. But to guarantee they're locked in place and to seal them, they give you this great big heat shrink stuff that's got the adhesive on it. And then you put it across the joint and you heat it up. And I found out on the first one that if you just heat it up and get it nice and warm and willy-nilly, and it basically says, I think I'm going to slide to the smaller element. And you can see it started out over here and it ended up over there. So that was a little annoying. But I found out if you just reheated it, you could slide it back. And also there's a lot of fasteners that may be questionable choices. This is one of the bolts from the clamps that holds the loop on the end of the elements, which is really a bad failure point. So I wanted to make sure I got them tight, and I overdid it on this one. So now we got to get it out to the tower. Here's a buddy of mine, Jim Stowers, helped me carry it out there. Stuff isn't very heavy. This is all of the loop elements here. And you can see with the tower tilted over, we just stand in the back of a pickup truck and put it on there. It's a lot nicer than doing that dangling from a safety belt at the top of a tower. Attach the elements. The stepper, the DB18E is a complex beast. It's any one of the 3 elements can be the driven element depending on the configuration in the band. So it's got a 3-way coax switch in it, as well as a couple of shorting switches in 2 of the EHUs. So there's a lot of there. You got to make sure that you get to check your wiring. Here's me putting in the Orion rotor. You can't really see it. It's inside the tower. But here you can see how the tower is tilted over, and I'm just standing in the back of a pickup truck. And then it's time to make it vertical. And there it goes. And you can see it goes from, it stays mostly level, not fully level, but level enough to work on it on the ground. And then as it goes up, it eventually just gets vertical. It's not quite vertical here because there was something hung up. I eventually went back and fixed that, and now it's now it's fully horizontal. And there we are posing after our handiwork. Okay, the feed line. There's lots of feed lines available. I decided to go with hardline, and I picked the U-Pen mainly because RF Connection. Joel up in Gaithersburg carries it. Highly recommended it. I trust him. I've done business with him for a long time. And they make the prettiest connectors. Aren't those connectors gorgeous? I love them. I did a little cable math and did a lot of cost-benefit analysis in terms of loss for all the different lengths. And so I encourage you to do that, especially if you're going to bury the feed line. This is an investment. This is as big an investment as your antenna, perhaps, depending, especially with me. I was buying 400 feet of this stuff, and I wanted several runs. So I ended up buying about 1,000 feet of feed line, as I recall. This is all of the wires between the shack and the tower site, and it's actually 310 feet there through the trench. So the purple are all the coaxes. Let me start at the bottom. I had the electrician dig a 24-inch trench. He laid the power in there I need 240 for the winch, and I have 120 volt service out there as well. He put that in, I think, a 2.5-inch conduit on the bottom of the 24 inches. I then laid, fortunately, there's almost no rocks on this in this property. So I then laid about 1 inch of soft dirt on top of that, and I laid my own, actually the hard line went next. I laid just direct buried that. Hardline direct buries just fine because it's a continuous copper jacket. It's not a foil. So even if you get a pinhole in the jacket, which is really hard to do because the jacket is extremely rugged, unless you punch all the way through the copper, you're not going to get any moisture getting into the to mess up your dielectric. So anyway, I just laid the hard line on top of 1 inch of dirt, and then I put my own 3-inch conduit on top of that with all the control and a whole bunch of spare Cat 6s. I figured you can't have too many wires, and I never ever wanted to dig another ditch. So I've got a whole bunch of spares there for that. There's also controls for the rotor, for the stepper controller. I threw an Ethernet switch out there as well for the camera. So here's the the cross country tour with the trencher. This is the electrician doing the trenching. This kind of is looking at the tower, looking back towards the shack. This is the feed line coming. I actually had to back my pickup truck up to a flatbed that came up directly from Tampa with this feed line on it. And this is one of those engine hoists that I was telling you about. Used it to help offload that. And this is the XYL of the century here, helping me lay the 5/8 inch line in the trench. And you can see at one end here, I split off the controls to the bollard here, and then the feed line comes up by the tower. And I actually learned another thing I learned what the term matic means. I'd never heard of a matic before, and here I am actually operating one. KF7P I can highly recommend for entry boxes. He worked with me quite a bit. I told him I didn't want to have jumpers outside the entry box. I wanted all the connections to be inside the box. And so we laid out, I gave him dimensions for everything. He pre-mounted the arresters and punched the holes in exactly the right place for the 3 5/8 inch run and the 1/2 inch run to come in from the tower. I'm really, really happy with this entry box. This is all a discrete wiring lightning protection. And this is actually an Ethernet lightning protection. So there's a whole bunch of stuff to control things as well. I'm going to move right along here. I won't go into this a lot. This kind of goes over some of the things I've already done. Grounding, really important. Ground rods should be separated by at least the sum of their lengths. So 8-foot ground rods are 16 feet apart. So I have 6 ground rods, and I have the inner ring connected all with number 4 solid copper wire. When you get it dug, it looks like a peace symbol. So this is to attract peaceful aliens from space. I CAD welded everything with these Harger units. It's a crucible. You throw some thermite powder in there and then ignite it. And basically it turns the wire and the top of the rod into this nice solid welded block. And the great thing about that is you can bury it and never have to dig it up again. Like if you use a clamp, you got to worry about corrosion. Okay, so here's the results. Lots of fun and lessons learned. This kind of tells the story. This is my club log, QSO count, and entities starting in 2008. And obviously I didn't log everything. This is basically mostly contest and DX contacts. So last year I made 13,000 Qs from the new QTH. That was kind of a big jump in activity. And I did 149 entities just last year. So I'm having a ball. The station is just playing like a dream. It was worth all the effort and hard work and dealing with Fairfax County. Sample of lessons learned. These are all things we already know. Free tower really isn't. But to me, it was a good move. A new tower would have cost about 14 grand plus shipping from California, which is probably another $400. So it's probably more than $400. At any rate, it saved me some cash up front, although I did bleed some money into it afterwards. Obviously, the more you know, the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know. Every time I learned something, I said, well, what about this? I did make some good decisions that I'd like to pass along. Have realistic goals, plan up ahead of time. Plan for the future. This is an investment in time. This isn't something you're going to use for a year, hopefully. Something you're going to use, well, I'm going to use for the rest of my active life. So I wanted to make sure that that's as long as possible. I made conservative design decisions. I could have gone with a 36-foot boom antenna, but I'm a lot more comfortable when that wind's howling at night with the way it is. Took the time to try to do it right as best I could, and I kind of stuck with it. You know, once I was into it, I didn't give up. So anyway, I now end up with a good home for N1RM. This is my operating position. One thing I didn't mention before is this is actually a standable table. You see the buttons here. Towards the end of a contest, getting on your feet, getting the butt out of the chair, actually, it changes your whole outlook. It really added a lot of energy. It really adds a lot of energy to me, especially the last hour or two of a contest. And if you rotate the camera 180 degrees, this is my repair shop for the ACOM amp. So I have a home for both of those activities now, just 5 miles from where I live. All right. This, by the way, was the insert for our Christmas card this year.
Hey, well, first off, let me say thank you so much, Rick. This is really great. I think I learned a lot. I'd say if anybody has any questions, probably can take 1 or 2 questions before we move into the rest of the meeting. So if anybody has a question.
Yeah, Rick, this is Ron, WA6YOU. The connectors, were those type N's?
Yeah, I used N females at the tower end and N males going to the lightning arresters at the shack end.
Is the fence a requirement in Fairfax County?
No. Everybody asked me why the fence is there. Is it for kids? I said, no, it's for lawyers. It's I overdid it. I have a 6-foot chain link fence with a big padlock on it. It is a neighborhood, and I just didn't want anybody in there, mainly because I'm not at the property all the time. And you can see I have a PTZ surveillance camera right here that allows me to check for safety when I remotely raise or lower it. But you treat it like a swimming pool, which I think only requires a 3-foot fence to cover yourself for liability. The other thing I did, my wife came up with this idea. I mean, you saw when we were working on the hole, it was a mud pit because it's a fairly low area and it does get really muddy. And we put in gravel here, and that makes it just wonderful to work on. Boy, you don't get muddy anymore. And because when I was working out there before, I mean, the mud was so bad it started to suck my boots off.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Rick. This has been great. I love seeing those pictures. It was really cool. Maybe if you can stick around a little bit after the meeting, maybe talk a little bit more about this as well. So
yeah, be happy to.
All right. Cool.